Alyssa Tyler woke up to the sound of guttural alien laughter and the acrid stench of burning metal. Her wrists burned from the restraints digging into her skin. Her vision blurred as she blinked away the grogginess of sedation. The last thing she remembered was running a routine patrol outside the colony perimeter. Then the blinding blue flash. Abducted. Again. She let out a slow breath, forcing herself to assess. Cold air nipped at her exposed arms, and the ground beneath her was damp. A jungle? No, too still. No animal sounds, no wind. A controlled environment. That meant an arena. A shadow loomed. Alyssa turned her head to meet the yellow, slitted eyes of a hulking Marix noble, its bony crest gleaming under the artificial lights. It smirked, or at least she thought it did. Hard to tell when an alien had a face like a battle axe. The creature's voice slithered through a translator, rich with amusement. She wakes. Good. We feared our prize would not last long enough to entertain us. Alyssa worked her jaw, tasting copper. I'm all about giving people a good time. Just hope you brought popcorn. The Marix exhaled, nostrils flaring in what she assumed was amusement. Behind it, a crowd of alien nobility observed from their high platform. Alyssa recognized the signs instantly, an old-fashioned hunt. The kind where the poor sap wakes up on an unfamiliar world, and a pack of heavily armed bastards gets to chase them for sport. Classic. Her gaze flicked to the line of creatures standing at attention. Bounty hunters, some hulking brutes, others slender and serpentine, all watching her with the cold detachment of seasoned killers. A few were already armed, blades and projectile weapons strapped to their chitinous armor. Not ideal. She rolled her shoulders and gave the Marix her best unimpressed look. You guys have a weird idea of entertainment. Ever heard of karaoke? The noble chuffed. This is an honor. Your species is untested in the great games. We assumed humans were too primitive to be sport. Yeah, and I assumed aliens would be smarter than walking into every dumb horror movie trope. She jerked her chin at the ornate harnesses some of the nobles wore, studded with jewels and intricate circuitry. Let me guess. You watch from your fancy little box, bet on who gets gutted first, then pat yourselves on the back for being civilized. The Marix's eyes narrowed. You are bold, but it will not change your fate. See, that's where you're wrong. A metallic chime rang through the air, and the restraints around her wrists snapped open. Alyssa barely resisted the urge to rub at her skin as the noble gestured toward the jungle beyond the clearing. Run. She met its gaze, unflinching. That's cute. You think I'm going to play along. The noble tilted its head, amused. You have no choice. The sound of mechanical clicks echoed as the hunters readied their weapons. Alyssa sighed. She could fight now, die fast, or run and maybe find an opening later. Fine, she muttered, rolling her neck. Let's make this interesting. With that, she bolted. The ground was uneven, roots jutting out like skeletal hands, but she adapted quickly. Behind her, heavy footsteps thundered, followed by the unmistakable hum of energy weapons warming up. Adrenaline flooded her veins. The game had begun. Alyssa wasn't the type to run blindly. She zigzagged between the twisted alien flora, mapping the terrain even as her pulse hammered. The artificial sky overhead cast an eerie twilight, making it hard to gauge depth, but she adjusted. That's what humans did. We adapt. A sharp crack split the air, and a tree to her left exploded into splinters. She threw herself forward, rolling as a second shot barely missed her. No way they were aiming to kill yet. They wanted to chase. Idiots. She spotted a fallen branch, thick and sturdy. Snatching it up, she swung it over her shoulder and kept running. 3, maybe 4 pursuers. Too fast for normal Marix, they'd send specialized hunters. One of them, a towering reptilian brute, leaped ahead of her trajectory, claws extended. Alyssa didn't stop. She twisted mid-step, dropped low, and swung the branch hard against its knee. The crunch was satisfying. The alien bellowed as it collapsed, but she didn't wait to admire her work. She sprinted past as the others closed in. Another shot whizzed past her ear. Sniper. They wanted to injure, not kill. She needed to change that. Spying a tangle of exposed roots, she veered sharply, sliding on her knees into the undergrowth. The snipers had the advantage in open terrain, but she just dragged them into her world. Unpredictable, chaotic. One of the hunters, a lanky, four-armed creature, slowed as it reached the thicket, wary. Alyssa didn't give it a chance to think. She lunged from the foliage, driving her makeshift club into its midsection. It let out a shriek, stumbling back. Before it could react, she ripped the weapon from its hands, a sleek plasma knife, humming faintly. "Oh, I like this." The alien's eyes widened as she flipped the knife in her grip. Then she gutted it. The moment the body hit the ground, the jungle erupted in movement. The hunters realized their mistake. Alyssa was no prey. A plasma bolt seared past her shoulder. She twisted, scanning, 3 left. 1 repositioning. 2 advancing. She threw herself into a forward roll, dodging another shot, then kicked up off a rock, launching herself toward the closest pursuer. The plasma knife met alien flesh, slicing through its armor like butter. The hunter barely gurgled before crumpling. A growl rumbled behind her. She turned just in time to see the big one, a towering brute, easily twice her size, raising a shot club. Alyssa dodged, but not fast enough. Pain lanced through her side as the impact sent her sprawling. She hit the dirt, vision flashing. The brute loomed, club raised for a finishing blow. And then, a howl. Something huge crashed through the undergrowth, slamming into the alien's side with terrifying force. The hunter screamed as jaws clamped onto its throat. Alyssa blinked. What the hell? The creature was massive, furred, and clearly not part of the game. A native predator? Must have been drawn by the noise. The brute tried to fight back. The beast ripped out its throat. Alyssa sat up, groaning. The remaining hunters hesitated. The tables had turned. She smirked, wiping blood from her lip. What's wrong? Not so fun when something's hunting you. Huh. They broke. The survivors bolted back toward the clearing. Alyssa let them run. She had other problems, like the very large carnivore still eyeing her. She held up her hands. Hey, buddy. No hard feelings, yeah. The creature sniffed the air, studying her. Then, it turned and disappeared into the jungle. Alyssa exhaled. She wasn't sure what just happened, but she'd take it. Stumbling to her feet, she retrieved a fallen rifle from one of the dead hunters. The balance was awkward, the trigger unfamiliar, but a gun was a gun. She made her way toward the clearing, heartbeat steadying. The nobles would be watching. She imagined their shocked expressions as she stepped into view, bloodied but standing, holding one of their own weapons. Alyssa spat onto the ground and leveled the rifle at the nearest drone camera. Then, grinning, she said, "Your turn." You said. The holographic feed of the hunt had been broadcast across multiple systems, a spectacle designed to entertain the nobility of the Marek's empire. Instead, it had accomplished something far more dangerous. It had reached Earth. On the bridge of the Raven's Claw, Sergeant Diego Mad Dog Hernandez exhaled smoke from his half-chewed cigar and leaned back against the control console, boots propped up as he replayed the footage. Alyssa, bruised, bloodied, alive. The moment she'd looked into the camera, rifle in hand, and muttered, "Your turn," Hernandez had nearly flipped the entire console in rage. Not because she needed help. No, Alyssa Tyler wasn't the kind of woman you rescued. She was the kind you unleashed. And if the Mareks wanted to play games, then humanity had just decided to change the rules. His team was already in motion. The Revenants weren't just any death squad. They were the worst nightmare of any species stupid enough to cross humanity. A collection of war veterans, mercenaries, and special forces operatives too dangerous to retire, but too valuable to waste. Officially, they didn't exist. Unofficially, they were the reason the last species that had tried abducting humans no longer had a homeworld. Hernandez crushed his cigar beneath his boot and turned to his comms officer. "Tell command we're going in." "Direct orders are to stand down," the officer replied, eyes wary. "Galactic Senate's already sending a warning." Do I look like I give a shit about some Senate full of bureaucrats who have never had to scrape human brains off a battlefield? Hernandez growled. "We're going in hot. And if command has a problem, they can try and stop us." The comms officer hesitated only a second before nodding. Within moments, the Raven's Claw and its accompanying fleet were on the move, engines roaring through the void. The Marek's homeworld sat at the heart of their empire, a fortress planet surrounded by layers of orbital defenses. Any sane species would consider it impenetrable. But the thing about humans? We weren't sane. The moment they dropped out of FTL, the Revenants opened fire. The lead dreadnought, Judgment Day, unleashed a wave of electromagnetic pulses, frying entire sections of the Marek's security grid. Within seconds, automated defenses flared to life, turrets pivoting, battlecruisers scrambling. It was exactly what Hernandez had planned for. The Raven's Claw dropped a tank straight out of orbit. The Marek's watched dumbfounded, as a reinforced APC equipped with railguns and miniguns plummeted through the atmosphere like the wrath of God and smashed into the capital city's defense towers, obliterating entire structures on impact. And then the drop pods followed, each one carrying a revenant, each one loaded with enough firepower to make a dictator cry. The moment Hernandez hit the ground, he was already moving, shotgun in one hand, combat knife in the other. Energy bolts screamed past him as alien forces scrambled to respond, but the Revenants didn't give them a chance. Human warfare wasn't about honor or posturing. It was brutality, chaos, and relentless efficiency. Hernandez caught a Marek soldier mid-charge and rammed his knife through its throat, twisting as he fired his shotgun into the chest of another. "You assholes think you can take one of ours and walk away?" He spat onto the ground. Cute. The rest of his squad spread out, clearing the immediate area with well-placed explosives and tactical brutality. Buildings crumbled, enemy reinforcements fell by the dozens, and alarms blared across the capital. The Mareks had expected a war. What they got was an execution. Hernandez didn't stop. His comm buzzed. "Boss," came the familiar voice of Lieutenant Graves, their sniper. "Got eyes on the VIP. Alyssa. Being moved. Looks like they're trying to transport her off-world before we can get to her." Hernandez growled. "Like hell they are. Send coordinates. We're cutting M off." The team converged, pushing through enemy lines like a wildfire, bullets and plasma tearing through anything in their way. The Mareks didn't understand human warfare. Not really. They thought they were advanced. But humanity had spent centuries perfecting one thing above all else: violence. They moved faster, hit harder, and fought dirtier. By the time Hernandez reached the Marek's transport ship, flames were already licking the horizon, and half the city was in ruins. The guard stationed outside never got the chance to react. Hernandez shot one in the head mid-sentence. The second barely raised its rifle before a sniper round punched through its skull. The doors blasted open. Inside, Alyssa stood, a stolen rifle in hand, one boot pressed against the throat of a Marek's officer she'd clearly overpowered. She smirked. "Took you long enough." Hernandez grinned, tossing her a fresh sidearm. "Could have left you. Let you handle it yourself." "Yeah, but then you wouldn't get to watch me burn their empire to the ground." He chuckled. "You got a plan?" Alyssa holstered the pistol. "I do now." Outside, the remaining Marek's forces were scrambling to retreat. Cowards. Alyssa stepped forward, surveying the carnage. The skyline was a storm of fire and smoke, and in the distance, she could see the human fleet repositioning, preparing to finish what they'd started. She turned to Hernandez, eyes alight with something dangerous. "We're not leaving yet." Hernandez raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Alyssa cracked her knuckles. "We're sending a message." Hernandez's grin widened. "Now you're speaking my language." And as the Revenants marched forward, weapons ready, and the Mareks finally realized the depths of their mistake, one thing became crystal clear. Humanity does not forgive. And we sure as hell don't forget. The Marek's homeworld burned. Fires roared through the capital, thick columns of smoke twisting into the sky like the arms of a dying god. Explosions thundered in the distance as the Revenants carved a path through what remained of the alien defenses. The Empire, once so certain of its superiority, was now nothing more than a case study in catastrophic underestimation. Alyssa Tyler moved like a specter through the battlefield, plasma rifle cradled in her hands, eyes scanning for threats. The Mareks had stopped fighting with discipline. Their formations had collapsed, their strategies shredded by the unpredictability of human warfare. Some had tried to hold the lines. Others had turned and run, hoping to escape the wrath of a species they had so foolishly provoked. Behind her, Hernandez barked orders into his comm, rallying the squads into a coordinated push toward the planetary command center. Status on their fleet? Alyssa asked as she crouched behind the shattered remains of an alien hovercraft, swapping out her rifle's depleted energy cell. Graves' voice crackled through the comms. Mostly scattered. Some ships are trying to regroup. Rest are either disabled or doing their best to leave the sector before command gets here. Alyssa wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her gloved hand. And the big one? Hernandez grinned through his cigar. Oh, they've still got their planet killer up there. I imagine they think it's a good backup plan. Alyssa scoffed. Let me guess, orbital bombardment failsafe. Bingo. Of course they had a contingency plan. She would have been disappointed if they didn't. The Mareks had built their empire on domination, on crushing lesser species before they could rise against them. Their capital was their stronghold, but more importantly, it was their symbol of power. If it fell, the empire would collapse in a matter of weeks. Alyssa smirked. Well, if they're worried about losing their planet, we should make sure they really lose it. Hernandez raised an eyebrow. You want to hijack their own doomsday weapon? Sure. If we can't use it, we can crash it. Either way, we make sure nobody's ever using that thing again. The idea was insane, which meant it was perfectly human. They pushed forward. The resistance was scattered, desperate. Alyssa and Hernandez led their squads through the broken streets, past wreckage and bodies, their boots crunching over debris. The closer they got to the command center, the clearer it became that the Mareks were running out of options. Alyssa saw it in their eyes, the realization that they had picked the wrong species to antagonize. A squad of Mareks warriors tried to block their advance, their remaining officers barking frantic orders. Alyssa didn't slow. She vaulted over a barricade, landing in the center of them before they could react. The first alien brought its rifle up. She buried a combat knife in its throat before it could pull the trigger. The second swung at her with a shock baton. She twisted, caught its wrist, and slammed the butt of her rifle into its jaw. A plasma shot whizzed past her ear. She grabbed the wounded Mareks by the arm and used it as a shield, letting its own squad gun it down. Then she fired back. Once, twice, 3 times. The last warrior turned to run. Hernandez caught it with a well-placed shotgun blast to the spine. Alyssa reloaded. They're getting sloppier. They're getting desperate, Hernandez corrected. He pointed toward the command tower, its structure still standing despite the destruction surrounding it. We bring that down, they lose their chain of command entirely. She grinned. Then what the hell are we waiting for? They stormed the tower. Inside, the halls were eerily quiet. No guards at the entrance. Another sign that this war was already over. The upper brass had already fled. The only ones left were those too stubborn or too afraid to retreat. They moved through the corridors, clearing rooms, planting charges. Alyssa kept her fingers steady on the trigger, eyes scanning for any last-ditch ambush. But the Mareks had lost their stomach for this fight. The control room was unguarded. Hernandez kicked the door open. A handful of officers turned toward them in alarm. One reached for a weapon. Alyssa shot him in the leg. Don't. The others froze. She stepped forward, tapping her rifle against the console. So, here's how this is going to work. You're going to give us full access to your orbital systems. If you don't, I start shooting kneecaps until someone finds their manners. One of the officers hissed. You wouldn't dare. Hernandez shot him in the kneecap. The officer howled in pain, clutching his shattered leg. Alyssa sighed. See? I hate being predictable. Now, someone give me what I want. The remaining officers scrambled to comply. Seconds later, the planetary defense grid was under human control. Alyssa tapped into the main broadcast. She wanted every remaining Marix to hear this. She adjusted the microphone, then leaned in. "This is Captain Alyssa Tyler of the Revenants. Your empire is over. You have one chance to surrender. If you run, we will chase you. If you fight, we will finish what we started. If you want to live, put your weapons down and walk away." She leaned back, smirking. "Or don't. I really don't care." The message went live. Across the planet, the remaining Marix forces broke completely. Some threw down their weapons, falling to their knees in surrender. Others fled for the ships that were still functioning, trying to escape the inevitable. Alyssa turned to Hernandez. Time to deal with the big one. The planet killer still loomed above them, a monstrous behemoth in orbit, waiting for one final command. Alyssa keyed into its systems, scanning the options. They could fire it, wipe out an entire sector. Or, she grinned. "We're dropping it." Hernandez blinked. "You're dropping a planet killer? Right onto the Marix fleet." He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're insane." She shrugged. "Or brilliant. Jury's out." A few keystrokes later, the behemoth's engines powered down. Its trajectory shifted. From the surface, it was like watching a moon fall from the sky. Alyssa and Hernandez walked out onto the balcony, watching as the weapon began its descent. The remaining Marix ships tried to scatter. They weren't fast enough. The impact was blinding. The Marix fleet vanished in fire. The shock wave rippled through the atmosphere, the sky burning with the end of an empire. Alyssa crossed her arms, satisfied. "That's a hell of a way to send a message." Hernandez nodded. "Think they got it?" She smirked. "Oh, they got it." The last of the Marix resistance crumbled. The empire was officially ash. Humanity had come for vengeance. And they had delivered. The smoke had barely cleared when Alyssa Tyler stepped onto the shattered remains of the Marix high command balcony. The sky still burned from the wreckage of their once mighty fleet, and the crater where their planet killer had fallen was a gaping wound in the earth, an unmissable testament to what happened when you crossed humanity. The weight of destruction pressed down on everything, but Alyssa felt nothing but clarity. Hernandez stood beside her, arms crossed, his cigar long since discarded. Below, the remnants of the Marix forces stumbled through the ruins. Their arrogance turned to ashes along with their empire. Some still clung to their weapons, eyes darting between each other, as if waiting for some miracle to reverse their fate. But the truth had settled into their bones now. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. Alyssa activated her calm revenants report. One by one, her squads checked in. The planetary defenses were completely neutralized. Any surviving Marix ships that hadn't been vaporized had either surrendered or were currently being boarded and stripped down for tech salvage. The death squads had done their job, and now only the cleanup remained. Hernandez let out a low whistle as he surveyed the ruin before them. Well, that escalated quickly. Alyssa smirked. Fast and efficient. The human way. Efficient? You just dropped a moon-sized weapon on their own fleet. Like I said, efficient. A dry chuckle escaped him. "Yeah, I gotta admit, you've got style." Below, a lone figure was dragged toward them, one of the remaining high-ranking Marix, his once golden armor now scorched and dented. Two revenants shoved him forward until he was kneeling at Alyssa's feet. He glared up at her with the last shreds of defiance, his slit-pupiled eyes burning with hatred. "You think this makes your kind powerful," he rasped. "That this slaughter earns you respect?" Alyssa knelt, grabbing the front of his ruined chest plate and pulling him close enough that he could see the bloodstains smeared across her knuckles. "No," she said, her voice quiet. "This isn't about power." The alien sneered. "Then what is it about, human?" She smiled, slow and humorless. "Consequences." His breath hitched just for a second, and she knew then that he understood. The Marix had gone through their entire history believing they were the dominant species, the apex predators of the galaxy. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity was weak. That mistake had cost them everything. Alyssa released him and straightened. She didn't need to kill him. He would carry the story of what had happened here, and fear would do the rest. There was no greater weapon than the knowledge that humanity was off limits. The sky above them flickered, a new presence arriving in orbit. The Galactic Senate's diplomatic fleet had finally decided to show up, too late to stop anything. Alyssa could already hear the incoming transmission requests flooding her comms. Hernandez raised an eyebrow. Think they're here to yell at us? Alyssa tilted her head. Or beg us not to do it again. She activated the nearest holo panel, accepting the incoming transmission. The holographic form of a stern-looking Avarian diplomat flickered to life before them, its shimmering blue projection unable to hide the deep concern written into its feathered features. Captain Tyler, the envoy said, tone carefully measured. The Galactic Senate demands an explanation for. Alyssa cut him off with a raised hand. No, she said simply. The envoy blinked, beak clicking in confusion. Excuse me. You don't demand anything, she clarified. You're not in a position to. The silence stretched. We understand that you have grievances, the envoy finally managed, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. But this level of destruction is justified. Alyssa finished for him. She gestured at the devastation around them. This wasn't some border skirmish. This wasn't politics. The Mareks hunted humans for sport. They broadcast it. They wanted to make a game of our suffering. She let the weight of that settle before continuing. Now, they'll never do it again, and neither will anyone else. The envoy hesitated. The Senate had seen what happened when humans got angry. No one in the galaxy had forgotten the last war, where humanity had been forced to fight. Back then, they had just been defending themselves. This was something else. This was a warning. Hernandez leaned in. So, let's keep this simple. You're going to pass a resolution declaring humans permanently untouchable. No more abductions. No more hunts. No more experiments. You so much as look at us the wrong way, and we come back swinging. The envoy's feathers ruffled. You're dictating terms to the entire Senate. Alyssa folded her arms. Yes. More silence. The kind that spoke of 1,000 calculations happening at once. The Senate had power, but power meant nothing in the face of fear. And right now, humanity was the thing they feared most. Finally, the envoy inclined his head. I will relay your terms. Alyssa smirked. Good choice. The transmission ended. Hernandez let out a breath and ran a hand over his buzzed hair. Well, that was fun. Alyssa watched the sky, where the Senate ships still hovered in tense silence. She could already feel the shift in the air. Today had changed the balance of the galaxy. Not just for the Mareks. For everyone. Hernandez nudged her. So what now? You want to head back, celebrate? Get a drink. She exhaled, stretching her sore muscles. Tempting, but I think I need something bigger. He chuckled. Bigger than wrecking an empire? She grinned. I was thinking a vacation. Hernandez snorted. You? Take a break. She shrugged. Gotta let the fear settle in first, right? Let them marinate in it. He laughed, shaking his head. Damn, I love being human. Alyssa smirked as she looked out over the burning remnants of an empire that had forgotten to fear the dark. Now they would never forget, and neither would anyone else.